I have not yet even begun to podcast. I got a question for you.
Huh?
Do you remember Cliff Knife?
Yes, I do. And intro music.
What? So today we're talking about Dark Cloud, right?
Yes. What was that you were saying about Cliff Knife?
Cliff Knife. Cliff Knife sounds like he would be like the singer of like a punk band.
I'm Cliff Knife, the lead singer of Dark Cloud.
Dark Chronicle.
But no, the real lead singer of Dark Chronicle is Akihiro Hino.
Yes, Akihiro Hino, who got his start at River Hill Soft.
Correct. And
I'd like to point out that River Hill Soft, to me, doesn't sound like the name of like a Japanese gaming company. It sounds like it would be like an American company that maybe made some like office software and then like sank all their money into a Myst clone.
I could see that.
Mid-90s.
I feel like the soft at the end kind of makes it sound a little bit more Japanese because it's got like that River Hill Soft.
Yeah.
If it was just like River Hill Softworks or like River Hill Studios, that sort of thing.
Well, River Hill Studios sounds like they make like straight to video movies. You know.
You go into the VH store and the VHS store, or rather the video store, and you rent a copy of Overblood.
Overblood, my favorite movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I when I saw like Overblood, when I watched the long play, I thought like, oh, this is maybe like a European game because it has that kind of feel with like the protagonist.
Yeah,
his beard and stuff.
Yeah, he's got like a
Raz.
Yeah, he's got like this like weird beard, like this big beard. His face is very poorly shaded.
I would have guessed like a Polish studio made this game.
Yeah, that's definitely something that you would think is that like, nah, this isn't made by a Japanese studio. But then again, it is an early survival horror title. And
that's true.
So they're either aping Resident Evil or Alone in the Dark.
Well, you know what? It struck me, this is probably just because I'm me, but I was struck by similarities to the classic Infocom game Planetfall, the old text adventure. Because there's like you're in like some kind of facility, and it's pretty much empty. There's nobody around, and you're like trying to figure out what's going on, and you meet a little robot friend.
Hey.
And I don't want to get into spoilers, but there's some similarities between Floyd and Peepo.
But yeah, Overblood is just a game about overcoming loss.
I don't even remember how how it all turns out.
There's a really weird plot twist towards the end. And ultimately it doesn't really matter.
Well, the biggest plot twist is when you see the credits and it's like lead programmer Akihiro Hino, and you're like, huh?
Wait, the Akihiro Hino?
No way. It couldn't be.
No. So then River Hill Studios put out Overblood 2, which was never released in the US.
Right.
But it did have a European release, I think 3 years after its Japanese debut. And there's similarities between it and Ocarina of Time and, whatchamacallit, Metal Gear Solid. But it came out before both of those games. Those games all came out the same year, and Overblood came out earlier that year. But yeah, it's
So they were all just copying Overblood 2?
It's either that or it's just these games are being covered in magazines and whatnot, and Akihiro Hino was just like, oh man, this idea sounds really cool. I'm going to put this in Overblood 2. And also, the only real Legend of Zelda thing from it is the fact that you have a hook shot, and that dates back to the SNES game, Link to the Past.
Oh, yeah.
And
it's true. It's true. I forget that sometimes.
Yeah, and the other thing is that that's the reason its biggest similarity to Metal Gear Solid comes from the fact that you're fighting a bunch of I don't know if they're terrorists or something. I couldn't follow the plot when I watched the bits and pieces of a long play, but it's just it's just a bunch of superpowered weirdos that make up the bosses. And
yeah, I watched a little of the long play, but I got bored really fast.
Yeah, I just skipped through it just to find things like the boss fights and whatnot. And it's a very strange mishmash of ideas from other games, which makes sense because that's kind of an Akihiro Hino trademark, I think. And he was more of a lead role in that than he was on Overblood.
Yeah, he was more of an influence on the design in that one, right?
Yeah, he was, I think, a lead designer, scenario writer, maybe something along the lines of that. But yeah, it was really his baby. And there's things in there one of the things about it is that you have the equivalent of rocket jumping.
Really?
Yeah, everybody has this really floaty jump. And I don't know if it's just the main character that can do this, but you have grenades that, if you use them, they send you higher in the air than you would from using your sparkly floaty jump. And
I did notice the jump.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a weird jump.
Yeah, and I was looking at the very end, the extra chapter, and there's this item in there that's horse meat hamburger. It's just what the hell?
Horse meat. That's the name of the first track on Dark Chronicle's debut album. Horse meat hamburger.
You would eat a cow, but you wouldn't eat a horse. Well, that's a horse's ass. Eat a horse meat hamburger.
Horse meat hamburger.
But yeah, there's
now.
There's also a sequence that's a little bit of a rhythm game. It's an actual
Really?
dance. Yeah.
Oh.
So again, very much there's a lot of things about it that just kind of set the tone for some of Akihiro Hino's projects when he left Riverhill. Or
Yeah.
I guess Riverhill rather probably dissolved first. He may have just left it first. But either way,
I don't know. Riverhill Soft is not currently a thing. I know that much.
yeah.
They're not out there making sure Overblood Online is running smoothly.
A true Overblood Online.
Rest in peace, True Fantasy Live Online.
Yeah. But the weird thing is I think they came up with a game called True Fantasy later on or something along the lines of that. Or Fantasy Live.
But that was just a porn game.
Ah. Well, anyway. So yeah, Akihiro Hino founded Level 5. And
I've got the Dark Cloud manual in my hand.
wow.
I've got the Dark Cloud manual in my hand.
And their debut title was Dark Cloud for the PlayStation 2. I used to think that
Akihiro Hino is credited as product producer, story and game design, just general all-around badass. Sorry, you were saying?
yes, that's the most important credit on any game. General, all-around badass. And it varies from studio to studio who that is. Like, for example, if it was id, you'd probably see John Romero in there, like id in their heyday.
Mm-hmm.
But for 3D Realms in their heyday, you would see Duke Nukem on there.
The character?
I'm here to kick ass and make games.
What about Cliff Bleszinski?
Yeah, he would be on there.
From our lost episode. Maybe we'll publish it someday.
Probably will. But yeah, so Akihiro Hino and Dark Cloud. Dark Cloud is really what I wanted to get at. Enough about American Badass.
What was Death Nuker?
Yes. I couldn't remember his name at one point, and so we were talking about a hypothetical appearance by him at E3. So that's the name that I gave him. And
yeah,
he was going to make an announcement that he was going to make a Powerpuff Girls game.
Oh yeah.
But either way, Dark Cloud.
Dark Cloud.
It started development as a PS2 game. There was a point in time when I thought it was one of those titles like, Eco. Eco started as a PlayStation game and then migrated to the PS2, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but there's no way they could have got this to work on a PlayStation.
No, not Eco, nor Dark Cloud.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what Eco turned into, but I feel like Dark Cloud was designed from the ground up to really take advantage of the PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
Like the way you kind of zoom in, like you can zoom out into build mode and then zoom right in, and the camera just kind of goes zoop, and you're in there, and the detail is consistent. That really impressed me at the time.
Absolutely.
They kind of did a similar thing in Dark Alliance.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, when you talk to the talking heads, I think the camera just kind of fluidly zooms in, and that really impressed me. And yeah, it was the same with Dark Cloud, the way you could just zoom in and out, and it was all kind of fluid.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of other things that would be there's the opening cutscene, which is, I think there's a couple of FMVs still on the disc and whatnot. More so, I think, in the sequel. I think the little attract mode in Dark Cloud isn't pre-rendered or anything. I forget. But pretty much everything is done in engine for the most part.
Yeah.
Including the opening scene, this really impressive opening scene where you've got these two dudes coming in, a military-looking dude and some fat kind of priestly or just clerical-looking dude coming in, and they're witnessing the rite of spring being performed essentially in front of a big urn.
Right.
And they've got all these dancers working in tandem and whatnot, and then a genie
shaking their booties.
Yeah. A genie pops out of the urn, and he's got really impressive facial animation and everything.
A genie who was strictly from commercials.
Strictly commercial.
Had the unmitigated audacity to eat my favorite cleric dude. That was the best part, because he was just like, I just woke up and I'm a hungry genie. I need food.
That dude there.
He just eats that guy.
Yeah. And then, so the military dude, whose name is Flag, he goes off with the he goes off with the genie to No Rune Village. No runes there. No. And our protagonist is going to, go to a dance festival in town, kind of similar to the one that was going choreographed back in, like, wherever Flag is from.
Right, yeah.
And, while he's en route to the, he's at the festival and everybody's doing their dancing, all of a sudden the genie shows up and starts zapping people and whatnot. And, because our protagonist, whose name is canonically Towen?
Yeah. Towan?
I don't know. I recommend renaming him.
Yeah.
He sacrifices his life to save, like, his childhood friend or whoever she is, and then the Fairy King, whose name, I shit you not, is Simba, comes in, and he's all like, "Oh, you did a good thing there.
Simba.
I can trust you with this magic stone. Use it to revive all your buddies."
Oh. Okay, alright, dog. Don't unplug my PC, please. I don't have a battery. Good dog. Yeah, and thus the story begins.
Yes. And so, you have this Atlamelia stone to open up these orbs called Atla, and people come out of them. And things, like objects, like, like structures.
Buildings, trees,
Llamas.
rivers.
So,
and then, like, accessories for the houses and buildings,
yeah,
too.
little things that go on them. Here's a torch.
Yeah. You slot them in there. One of the things I like about the original Dark Cloud is, like, the way that you put the buildings in and then the people, and then you zoom down and you talk to the people and they're like, "Oh, I want a torch." You know,
Thanks for
okay.
serving me.
Here's your torch.
I don't.
And I love going into the buildings, even like replaying it recently. I was like enchanted by just the little details when you go in somebody's house and like you see like just little knickknacks everywhere, and it's very distinctive.
And
there's not just like generic props that are just everywhere.
what helps that too is that you can only do this in those buildings, but you can go into first person mode and walk around and look around at those little knickknacks.
Yes, that was something that I missed in Dark Cloud too, was that first person movement. You could still look around in first person, but you couldn't move.
Exactly.
And it draws you in. It's so immersive walking around, looking.
So, in terms of that aspect of the game, the whole city building approach, it's like, earlier mentioned all around badass Akihiro Hino, taking inspiration from other games and like just kind of like meshing them into like a solid core. I mean, Overblood 2 didn't look solid, but Dark Cloud is a very solid game at its core.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the city building section, I feel like, takes equal inspiration from ActRaiser and Soul Blazer, both titles developed by Quintet, published by Enix for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, because you've got the Soul Blazer, like kind of bringing the individual people from the town back and things like that, right?
Yeah, like you go into the dungeon and like in Soul Blazer, you just like hit a little switch and all of a sudden like the person's house pops up and there they are.
Right.
Dark Cloud is just like you get them sealed in your stone, like you take them from the little orbs that are floating around. But yeah,
Right.
and then the overhead view is definitely like ActRaiser, like.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got those two elements coming together to like form like a really solid little thing. I think that the building mode in particular, like the Georama mode, actually, as it came to be known, that had a little bit more. You had a little bit more control over that in pre-release materials, like similar to the way things were in the sequel. I think it's been a little while since I've seen those videos, but something else that got lost in translation was the protagonist riding on a magic carpet. And he's kind of got like this interesting flair to his clothing. He's got the pointy elf ears, like Link, in between that and the Z targeting. Well, not Z targeting, but like, the lock-on mechanic. I think people made the Zelda comparison for that reason. And
oh yeah, definitely. At the time, it was like Zelda meets Sim City or something.
And
but everybody compared it to Zelda because it did have that style of combat with the lock on.
Yeah, but
yeah, regarding Toan's clothing, he's got like that poncho. It's kind of got like a South American kind of a feel to it.
Yeah, and Nelrune Village in general kind of has that feel. I think.
Yeah,
it's like,
which is kind of, you don't see that often. They always go for like the desert, and it's like Egypt or whatever, and then they go for like a Asian kind of a thing. But yeah, you don't often see like that South American kind of influence.
Yeah, the areas are pretty, and it's not like a desert like kind of area either. Nor is it like a heavy like rainforested jungle. Like it's what you would expect of like a just like this little grassy canyon, I guess. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah,
it's
kind of like the plains.
Yeah, it's what you would expect from the first dungeon, or not the first dungeon, but the first town in an RPG. But it's definitely got that like South American vibe all over it. And the areas from that point onward, I think, generally have distinct vibes, with the exception of one that we'll talk about, where it's just like, it is that generic desert environment.
Oh yeah, the desert place.
Yeah, Muskalaka / Muskaraka.
Yeah. In my mind, it's conflated with the desert area in Skies of Arcadia. Like, I try to picture it, and I just see that. And then I'm like, oh, man, I never finished that. And I probably never will.
So, yeah, the combat, I mean, the Zelda influence doesn't really go beyond the whole, like, targeting, not only, like, like, enabling you to hit your foes, but changing the context of what you're doing a little bit. And
yeah, it's not like changing targets and things like that. It's kind of counterintuitive, I remember.
Yeah,
there's a lot that's kind of awkward about the combat and just the general, like, even movement. Like when you walk backwards, like when you push down on the stick to walk like toward the camera, for some reason your character just like drifts off to the left too. Like, I don't really get why that happens, but it does.
And when you walk backward when you're locked onto a foe, you can hear like your character doing like this, like, it's like the sound effect that plays is going faster at the pace that they're backpedaling. Like, it sounds like they really are backpedaling. It's like
backpedaling on a bike or something.
Yeah, it's just like really quick, rapid succession of footsteps, and it doesn't look like that much.
Yeah,
like they're a crab or something scuttling backwards.
Yeah,
but yeah, the combat. The other big thing about the combat is you have the weapon system, which And the first game is definitely a love it or hate it kind of thing. Love it and hate it, actually. I think,
Yeah,
at
I
the
would
same
say
time.
it's love it and hate it at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it is engaging, and it's annoying as well.
Yeah. So there is a weapon durability system that made its way into the sequel. And in the very first game, you are given a starting weapon that, if it reaches 0 HP, it'll just just go into a broken state where you can repair it, and you might lose some of the experience that you gain. That's right, your weapons level up.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, you still have a weapon that you can fall back on. The other
But
weapons...
that's the only weapon that's like that,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah, so the other weapons, which you can build up to the point where... That's like literally the name of the system, is the build-up system. You can upgrade them, and then they can go in from a tree, like, into new weapons. So your sword can become a new sword once you fill certain prerequisites. But you can
Right,
lose
but
that
if
weapon.
it breaks, yep.
You're loading a save, probably.
Yeah, that especially if you put a lot of effort into raising up the weapon,
Yeah.
which it does require a lot of like, unless you look at a guide, it's like so much attention to detail. Like you got to look at the weapon like, oh, well, I need more wind and thunder and beast killer. So let me get these gems out, and like it's like a whole thing
Yeah, and
to try to upgrade it to a new type of weapon.
it takes a lot more to upgrade it to a new type of weapon, especially at the initial levels in Dark Cloud than it does in the sequel.
Yeah,
But nonetheless, your default weapon, that one that's quote unquote unbreakable, or at the very least, can be restored from its broken state, and you can't do anything like in terms of upgrading it beyond just leveling it up. You can't do the build up system where you get like these branching paths and everything and whatnot, and you drastically increase the power of your weapon and get even like new little attributes to it, like you upgrade from one slingshot, let's say, to the other, and you get the ability to steal from enemies now.
right.
So, but
And of course, one of the weapons is the cliff knife. I guess we should mention that so that the title makes sense.
I don't know if that's Dark Cloud 1 or 2. I know...
I think it's one where they had the cliff knife, and then in 2 they corrected it to the Chris knife.
Well, I thought it was called like the... I thought it had like a different name in the menu and a different name outside the menu. Like it was Crystal Knife. And I think in Dark Cloud 2 they made it the Cliff Knife. And they just completely botched the localization there.
I'm not sure, but I think you're right that there's... I don't know if it was that one that had a different name in the menu.
That was definitely the one.
Might be. Yeah. They even like within the localization they couldn't land on one correct answer.
And that's a pretty common thing going on with Dark Cloud, is that the localization is very inconsistent. Like the aforementioned Muskalaka, Muskaraka, they couldn't decide on which one. They used different names for locations. And
Well, going back to you mentioned the weapon that allows you to steal, that's a slingshot, right?
yeah,
Bandit slingshot. And speaking of slingshots, there's one very important slingshot that we definitely have to talk about.
oh, of course. Steve.
And that would be Steve, yeah. Steve the talking slingshot.
Yeah, so you'll get him out and he'll give you... He might tell you a little bit of useful things about the enemy.
Like the enemy that you're currently targeting, I guess?
Yeah, other times he'll just make little comments. There's this enemy called Friday, and he says, "Friday, I'm in love."
Oh. That's great. Somebody was a Cure fan?
Yeah, somebody on the staff.
Yeah.
And he also talks to the character who wields the slingshot. And I love his quote where he's just like, "Zhao, say something." Yeah, the character's name is spelled Xaio. I don't know whether you pronounce it as Zhao, as Shao, something along the lines of that. But yeah, she's somebody you find in the first village, and she's initially a cat. I was just gonna say initially terrible,
Right.
but she's initially just a cat.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's XIAO.
yeah, what'd I say?
I think you said XAIO?
It's Xio. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But yeah, so you find a cat in a dungeon,
Yeah,
right?
and this
And then it's waiting for you at your house?
it gets turned
When you
into
complete the diorama?
yeah, it gets turned into an atmosphere by the guy who may or may not be a bad guy. It's ambiguous. He might be
Oh, yeah.
possessed. Who knows?
Right. And then yeah, so it gets turned into an atlamia, and then you put it in your house, and then you go and you find it, and then it turns into a girl.
Yep.
And she acts kind of cat-like too.
Yeah, to an extent. But yeah,
She like affectionately nuzzles you or something.
yeah,
doesn't she?
yeah. As soon as you turn her into a human form, and Towen is just like all like, what?
The hell's going on in this game? Damn it.
But yeah, she is initially terrible until you find a slingshot, and some characters kind of sort of
Yeah.
obsolete her a little bit later on. But if you put effort into her slingshots, you can actually get, honestly, like a really useful ranged combatant, because the slingshots are a very fast weapon compared to some of the other ranged weapons.
Yeah, I was surprised how useful the slingshot was as soon as I got like a decent one. Like the starter slingshot is just garbage.
Yeah. Yeah, this
But then I got a half decent one and I was like, oh, she's actually useful. Huh.
yeah, and
That was on my recent replaying of it, where that's about as far as I got, was getting her. I did a little bit of the forest area, but I didn't recruit the next character. What's his name?
Goro.
Goro.
He only has 2 arms.
Two-armed Goro.
Yeah, and
Grimace ripped off his other 2 arms.
and he's like a heavyset kid. Like I just describe him as a kid. He's like a teenager or something, I think. And
Yeah.
he's got like this like bear outfit. Everybody in Madataki village has like this animal motif. Like they wear the pelt of an animal that they hunted.
Let me read you the description of Goro from the manual. Goro is a hunter living in a treehouse close to Poacher Village. What the hell is Poacher Village?
Maybe that's the literal meaning of Madataki?
Maybe. It could be that the manual was like localized by a different team or something and they didn't agree on it.
There might be like 5
There's
different
more inconsistencies.
5 different localization teams in here. Part of the thing
Yeah.
about the Dark Cloud duology, per se, is that it's level 5 developing it, but Sony Computer Entertainment of your locale here, I think technically owns the series to an extent, and they.
I think so. They're not credited in the Dark Cloud 1 booklet, but they are in the Dark Cloud 2 booklet. There's like a whole separate set of credits for SCEA.
Yeah, and I think they get a presented by message at the start of the game. I can't recall if that's like standard for PS2 games or if it's just ones that they did have a hand in producing. But we'll get back to that later.
Yeah, what were we talking about?
Goro.
We've already been rambling for 40 minutes and we're still only on Dark Cloud 1.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, so we got Goro. And he wields hammers.
Ruby?
Everybody has their own little unique abilities that they can use in the dungeons. Towen, yeah. So Towen is the only.
Well,
yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, does he have a special ability?
He's the only one that can open the Atlas Stones.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So
I want to just point out that switching between them is kind of annoying because you have to dive into the menu, select like character, and then choose your character on like a spinning wheel.
Yeah, and the select button does provide a shortcut, but it's still a little cumbersome.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I was looking for that the last time I was playing, and it didn't take long to stumble upon it. But yeah, you're still going to go into that menu a lot anyway to switch weapons and whatnot.
Yeah, and repair your weapons unless you have like big bucks for auto repair powder.
Yeah, exactly. Money management is a big issue in the first game, especially. I think in both games. The enemies don't really drop much. But yeah, so
I feel like it's a little easier in the second one.
Yeah. Zhao can jump over small pits.
Yep.
Goro can use his hammer or axe. He has, I think all of his weapons lead to the same evolution, but he wields both hammers and axes.
And well, whatever you count a giant frozen fish as. I guess that would be a hammer.
Yeah, that's definitely a hammer. As a matter of fact, that is definitely a hammer because that survives and makes its way into Dark Cloud 2, I believe.
Oh yeah, I think that's right. I do remember that.
But yeah, there are these switches that he can hit, and they open doors.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, Matataki Village is just like, your typical, like, it's like the forest area per se, and it's like
it's every forest area basically.
Yeah, you have
a
queen
river.
or queens, which is kind of like
hospital?
yeah, nautical is a good way to put it. It's like a typical like European like fishing village, like if you want to make a comparison, maybe you could vaguely compare it to Italy or something.
Okay.
Not Italy, Venice, like that area. But it's not like it's an area where you would travel on the canals by boat either. It's just like right by the ocean.
Is that where you meet Ruby?
Yes. Yeah, Ruby, your fourth playable character, wields magic rings. Some characters have a charge attack. She's one of them. If you change the element of her ring, you can use that as akin to Goro's like weapon as like a way to open doors again. It's just like they both serve as a key. But Ruby's is a little bit more involved because you have to match the element of like this gemstone that's on a door and fire your magic at it. So yeah, she has a charge attack. So does Towen, who has 2 charge attacks. You shouldn't really use either one. I would say, especially the second one, because you're just gonna ruin your weapon that way. Ruby's is useful. Goro's is pretty decent as long as you keep your weapon HP above like 1/3, I would say. Like, it can really dish out a lot of damage. It's just all a matter of not breaking the hammer that you're using.
I might be thinking of Dark Cloud, the similar ability of Monica in Dark Cloud 2, but I remember the ring really kind of only being useful if you charge it. Otherwise, it doesn't do much damage.
It's a little bit stronger, I'd say, in Dark Cloud 1, like, uncharged than in Dark Cloud 2. But that's not counting, like, what happens when you really put effort into the rings in Dark Cloud 2, also.
Right. I don't think I ever really did that.
So, But yeah, so you have Ungaga from Muskalaka / Raka, who's just like this stoic, stoic is really all you can do to describe him. He's this big, tall dude, and initially he's depressed because his girlfriend or whatever was, he thought she was dead, and it turns out, no, she just got sealed away in the stone, of course. But
he's the guy in Dragon Ball that went to the tournament so he could buy water for his village.
Exactly. And Master Roshi looks at him and he's just like, oh, he's not a gag manga character.
Why he's so serious?
And he's just like, oh yeah, we got water everywhere. Here, I'll throw a capsule. You have water for your entire village for the rest of eternity.
Yeah. I love that, the way that worked out. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just a stoic guy. And that's the desert area, right?
Yeah, he wields like staves and spears. And
I'm trying to remember how far I got when I played Dark Cloud back in the day.
You got to the final dungeon.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. That's the farthest that I've gotten to. I never beat the final boss or anything, but gotten to the final dungeon. But yeah, he's got spears and staves, and he can whirl around the spear to dispel like the darkness out of certain areas. Again, it's just another key.
Yeah, it's just an annoying gimmick that makes you change characters. Like, oh, I got to jump over this part of the dungeon. Okay, let me go and change my character because this is exciting gameplay. I'm not a fan of that. It just kind of slows things down.
Yeah, it does. But at the same time, I guess you've already cleared out most of the dungeon, like the keys and things and whatnot. It's handy to have the other characters on hand for like when you go into the back zones of the dungeons and whatnot. And
yeah, well, I mean, the better version of that is just to have different characters be more useful in different combat situations.
yeah,
Which it is true to an extent, but like just to have like some kind of obstacle where it's like, oh, you have to use this guy. I think maybe they were trying to like kind of make you feel like they were all like working as a team, like everybody's got something to do.
yeah, but at the same time, Toen is the only character that you can use outside of dungeons. He has access to the fishing minigame.
That's true, which doesn't go that far beyond just like catching fish and then getting points for them and trading them in for
But
stuff.
ironically, it feels more useful just from that than like the outcome of like all the fishing stuff in Dark Cloud 2.
But it's so much more involved.
Yeah, you feel like you're accomplishing more, but in reality, you're not.
You're not getting much out of it.
I mean, we'll get to some of the aspects of the fishing in Dark Cloud 2, because it's tied to other mini games and whatnot. But yeah, you can also fish up a rare fish called a Mardan Garayan, and you can use that to dispel traps on the bigger chests in dungeons. Like, it'll be like Mardan Garayan shows you the way, and he'll identify the trap properly for you, so you don't have to guess, which is nice.
Yeah.
So that's another bonus of the fishing minigame.
That's a weird trait for a fish to have.
Yeah.
Just like, like what? Why would a fish even know that? They don't even have chests in the ponds or the rivers, or wherever the heck you get the Mardengarian.
But yeah, a big part of the game's plot.
Maybe they do.
A big part of the game's plot is all about getting to the moon for some reason.
Yeah. Well, of course it is.
Yeah, you need to get to the moon to fight the Dark Genie. It's just the way the whole plot goes. Like, you're finding the moon people at first, and then they're like, oh, we can't help you, but our friends on the moon will be able to help you. And then later on, in a cutscene, as you're like making your way to the moon, you see a moon person take off his hood, and you find out that they're rabbit people.
Oh my god!
And to a Japanese player, that's pretty normal. It's funny that you mentioned Dragon Ball earlier, because I think like at some point fairly early on, Goku goes to the moon and he finds rabbit people there who are like gangsters. So
okay,
there's that whole legend of, instead of seeing a man in the moon, they see a rabbit jumping in the full moon. So that's less of a shocking twist to a Japanese gamer.
right?
Everywhere else in the world, it's just like, what the fuck?
Rabbits?
And a moon person ends up being your final party member.
Yeah. Osmo?
Osmond.
Cosmic Osmo?
Osmond wields guns and can fly. He can actually fly over the pits that Zhao can jump over. So between Ruby and Osmond,
I guess you're useless now.
Yeah, but not entirely. Like we said earlier, if you build up Zhao, she can be really good, and like in combat and in different scenarios than the other two ranged characters. But yeah, he
flies using a hello pack.
Yeah, and he's got guns, which includes like
finally a gun.
Yeah, machine guns and lasers. I think is like pretty much the primary weapon types for him. And I think I cut you off earlier when I went into detail about Osmond.
You did, and I will never forgive you.
Do you remember what you're going to say?
No, I don't. Did you cut me off? I don't know. I was probably just gonna babble about something stupid. So no big loss there.
But yeah, you make a giant mech and you fight the Dark Genie, and it turns out that big genie that you saw at the beginning wasn't the real genie. It was just a mouse that got sealed in the pot with the genie and absorbed some of its magic.
What? So then you have to fight the real genie?
Yeah, that's pretty much the end game, is that you're trying to seek out the real genie at its like point of origin before it starts possessing people. Because it does that like for a couple of different characters in the game. And yeah, that's kind of sort of involves time travel, I think, too. Yeah, it does involve time travel.
Oh, so that kind of hints at the time travel that we'd see in Dark Cloud 2?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. The other thing, I think the final talking point that I'll put out in here is that the dungeons are randomly generated. And that extends into the second game.
Much like a roguelike.
Yes. So you can add probably Torneko no Daibuken as a inspiration to this game.
Yeah. I mean, roguelikes, I think, were popular in Japan.
Yeah, they definitely are, and definitely were. But I know Akihiro Hino's favorite video game is Dragon Quest III.
Okay.
So, I mean, it might be an assumption on my part to say that it'd be like Torneko no Daiboken would be the influence for the randomly generated dungeons. There's definitely different games and different genres that use randomly generated dungeons too, but
Yeah.
it's probably a
I mean, I
safer
think
bet.
Sharon the Wanderer is the superior game
Yeah, it is.
from Chunsoft, but Torneko no Daibukan is kind of fun.
Yeah.
It even has a little bit of that like building things up back on the surface with your shop, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So there's that could definitely be some influence there. I never thought of that.
Yeah, I was just making the tie-in because I knew he liked Dragon Quest, and so I thought to myself, well, if there's one roguelike that somebody who really loves Dragon Quest would be inspired by, it would be that one.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah.
I think we can move on to Dark Cloud 2.
I almost forgot about the randomly generated dungeons. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's time to move on to Dark Cloud 2.
Yes.
Which I also have with me here, so I can look at the manual.
Man, you are on point today.
I wanted to be able to, like, you know, keep myself focused by looking at the manuals.
So, in two regions, this game is called Dark Chronicle.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, it's called Dark Cloud 2, so, if you're from... If, for whatever reason, you're listening to this podcast, and by this even smaller probability that you're from Europe,
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna know this game is Dark Chronicle, but we're just gonna call it Dark Cloud 2 because that's we know it by.
Because we're Americans.
That's right.
Yep. We like beef and guns and Dark Cloud 2.
Mm-hmm. Dark Chronicle, what's that?
Dark Chronicle. I ain't never played no Dark Chronicle. So Dark Cloud 2 is like a significant step up in terms of presentation, story, and just general amount of just stuff to do at all times.
It is quite a package. I don't know. I think it came out in like 2002 in Japan.
Yeah, yes, 2003 in the US.
Yeah, early 2003 in the US. So I was associated with 2003 as being like this huge leap just because of Dark Cloud 2.
This is a really nice manual too. Like, I don't know, like the material that the outer pages are made out of is like this nice thick cardstock.
All right, so
I don't know, the actual design of the manual it's a little weird.
Dark Cloud 1
It's nicely made.
Dark Cloud 1 came out in December of 2000 in Japan. And then in May of 2001 in the US. So that's a healthy, like 23-month, probably like around a little over 2 years. I'm sure they were probably doing some planning for Dark Cloud 2 prior to finishing Dark Cloud 1. But still, the general increase in quality and presentation, everything, and the amount of things to do in that like 2 year span of time is pretty insane. And this is like the company's second game.
They didn't. Yeah, I guess it would be.
It's like, yeah, I mean, it has roots in River Hill Soft, but they pretty much came straight out of the gate with quality titles. It's almost like Valve in a sense.
Mm-hmm. I think they're even like their slogan, like when you start up Dark Cloud 2, it's like level 5 quality games or something.
And as time went on, that's like, not always necessarily the case, but for Dark Cloud
I
2, it
mean,
is. I used to think it was the greatest thing on the face of the planet.
yeah, in its time too, like in context in 2003 or whatever, there wasn't a whole lot like it that really like I mean, there were other games that had lots and lots of content, but I don't know, just as a total package, Dark Cloud 2 is very impressive.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, you've got like this whole opening sequence where you introduce your main character, and it's just like very slowly introduces new gameplay elements. Like it adds another character, and then it adds you go through a whole dungeon without doing any georama.
No diorama.
You don't get that till like halfway through the second dungeon.
But before you even get to the diorama, you still have access to like cool, nifty like side quest stuff. You get access to photography really early on.
Yep, there's already photography, and from photography comes inventing things because you take pictures to get ideas, and then you put them together into inventions. And so when you catch fish, you can build a fish tank to put them in, and then you can go into your fish tank and breed your fish.
Well, hang on. The fishing doesn't come until the second chapter.
Oh, that's
but yeah,
true. That's
yeah,
true.
you're pretty much right on the money there.
Well, before you do any of that, there's the whole sequence with like when you're in Palm Brinks and it's just like the circus. It's just a whole opening sequence, and it has this like almost like Studio Ghibli kind of a like feel to it.
That's a very apt comparison, I would say.
Yeah,
because they would work together.
well, you
I
could
think,
say
later
Disney, but yeah, Ni no Kuni, right?
on. Yeah, but yeah, really like it's just got like this very much. You go from this little isolated village that for whatever reason is like you don't quite know why that is until you get to the later ones and you're like, oh, okay, so these other areas have just been like ravaged.
You say little, but it's actually it's a very large area. There's a lot to explore there. I think it opens up a little bit more when you get into the first or second dungeon, right?
Yeah, no, I do say little, but in reality it's like a city. It's like an actual city that's like you don't build it up or anything.
Yeah.
It's just there's all these inhabitants that are
just
unique
there.
and
it's very cozy. I wanted to play some Dark Cloud 2 before this to kind of just remember a little bit more about it, but I didn't have a lot of time, but I just loaded it up and went to Palm Brinks and just kind of walked around for a bit, and it's very like cozy and nostalgic going back there and looking at it.
yeah, it's got that it's kind of got that like Hero of a Thousand Faces kind of character to it. Because it's got the hero's journey going on, and the story just starts off kind of small, kind of a narrow viewpoint, and then eventually after making his way through, unfortunately, the sewers as the first dungeon. Our main character, Maximilian, known as Eurus in Japan, he like sees like the outside world for the first time once he gets through the sewers, and he's just like, whoa.
Yeah, this is one instance where I can forgive the sewer level because it really kind of like draws out the tension of getting to the outside world, because like Max keeps talking about that, and then like you finally get through that dungeon and you see it I think you get like this big kind of grand view of like a vista, right? The first time you see it, you're kind of like up on a cliffside or something.
Yeah, and you find the train that you use for most of the game, I believe.
Right.
Uh,
What
yeah,
was the name of
and
the train?
I know it's the Blackstone Railroad.
Yeah.
I don't remember if the train specifically has a name. There's actually two trains in the game, but the latter one is like very much like an end game kind of thing. Like you only really use it for one or two chapters, and then that's it. But yeah, so
And
you
that's when you end up at the forest area.
yeah, you so he gets in trouble because he's got an Amelia Stone. Max has one.
Right.
And this wicked clown keeps searching for it. His U.S. name is Flotsam.
Yeah.
I think his Japanese name was different, but I forget what it was.
He's
so.
kind of annoying.
Yeah.
But it just makes you hate him more. So it's good. It's good villain.
Yeah, there are
stuff.
villains. There are villains in the game that, like, they're good deep down inside, or oh my god, it's just like me. They're just like me in this way. Holy crap!
Yeah. But Flotsam's just a piece of crap.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and Max's whole motivation is that, aside from the fact that he's fleeing Flotsam, is also the fact that he is writing a letter to his mother as the framework, because she left when he was little and went somewhere mysterious. He doesn't know where she went, so that's part of his quest, is to find out what happened to her.
Right.
And he works in this inventor's shop. This inventor named Cedric, and you get a ride pod early on. Once you've gone through this photography segment, once you've invented the fuel.
Oh yeah, that's like the first thing you build, right? Is the ride?
Yeah, you build
pod?
like the fuel. I think the fuel pack.
Oh yeah.
And then
Yeah. Because the ride pod is there, but it doesn't have a fuel pack.
Yeah.
So that's how they introduced the invention system.
and his name is Steve.
Yeah.
Steve returns.
Yep. So we get another Steve. Steve doesn't talk until you build like a talking, like a chip for him or whatever that makes him
And then
talk.
he never shuts up.
Yep. Use the supersonic mega cannon.
Yeah, he sounds.
We've talked about just the setup for this game, and we haven't even mentioned Monica.
We did earlier in the podcast, but yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's worth pointing out that that's the first thing you see when you start up a new game is Monica.
Technically, yeah, you start the game from Monica's perspective, and she has an actual surname, Raybrandt. You never find out what Max's surname is, but she's a princess from the future, and you start off just fighting these dudes who are like the henchmen of the main villain, Emperor Griffin, and then she finds her dad deceased, like he just got killed by this mysterious swordsman who looks like the guy who might be a good guy, bad guy from the first game. And so, it goes from that to Max's story, right afterwards.
Yeah.
And Monica makes a little bit of a cameo appearance, at the circus. She's disguised herself using magic as this boy around Max's age. And,
yeah, that's right.
And she steals his ticket, and then he's just like, oh. When he actually catches up with her, he's like, all right, if you really want to go see the circus, it's fine. And then she's like, then she knows, yes.
Oh, he's pure of heart.
Yeah, he's got the Amelia Stone. So she kind of I think is part of the process, sort of, in the way of guiding him towards the outside world and restoring it. And they officially meet in chapter 2,
But
when you when you enter the forest for the first time.
Right, you don't actually get to play as her until the second dungeon
Yeah.
area.
So yeah, Max wields Wrenches, and the wrench tree can become the hammer tree if you want. Hammers are more powerful but are slower. And he has access to several different types of guns. You get the plain old, like, like single shot, like really weak pew pew gun. But you then have 3 different trees of guns that come from there. So you get the machine guns, grenade launchers, and the most powerful category, which are lasers. And Osmond had pretty much the same setup. It's like Goro and Osmond combined into one character in a sense.
That's kind of, yeah. And then Monica is kind of like Ruby and Tone.
Yeah,
I guess combined into one character.
She has the swords and she has the armbands, and the armbands use magic. And as far as the combat goes, there's a bunch of...
she has her own equivalent of the ride pod.
Yeah, monster transformations, thing,
which is not very useful in my experience.
No, that's the general consensus among the community. The thing about the monster transformations is that they take forever to level up.
Yes.
And they're...
Because it's basically impossible to level them up unless you, like, kill a monster using in a different manner and then switch over to the transformation.
Yeah.
Collect which is, it's nice that you can do that.
Yeah, so in Dark Cloud 1 you could collect ABS to upgrade your weapons. And you could actually switch your weapon over, like right before the enemy dies, in order to transfer the ABS from the weapon that you use to kill it to, like, say, a lesser weapon that you might want to break down and attach to your main weapon.
Oh, that's a good strategy.
Yeah, so you could switch experience that way. But one of the trends that goes in Dark Cloud 2 is just less obfuscation of these combat mechanics. Because now when you defeat an enemy, the ABS is these little blue dots that pop out. You collect them. And
yeah, they just absorb.
Yeah, you can even switch between characters or, like, forms. Like, say, for example, you wanted to get some experience to upgrade your ride pod, but your ride pod kind of sucks right now, so you're max, and you can go ahead and shoot the enemy with a laser and then switch immediately over to the ride pod. You could even go from the ride pod to max to Monica to the monster transformation if you wanted, and collect the ABS.
Yeah, which is probably more likely in the early game where you'll be switching to that ride pod a lot, because it's once you get like a good gun for the ride pod, it's super powerful. But yeah, the only downside is that when you switch over to another character, instead of just all the ABS going into the weapon you used, it distributes evenly into the weapons that character has. So there's a downside to it, but that's a good thing in a way too, because you can level up all your weapons kind of evenly.
Yeah, and it's even like, if you've been neglecting, say, your armband, it would still be worth it to collect it, say, like, defeat an enemy with a ride pod and then switch over to Monica.
Yeah.
So yeah, weapons don't disappear when they break. Can't stress how much of an improvement that is. And there's some other, like, improvements aside from the transparency of some things. Like, say, for example, you could block in the original game, and it's pretty normal to forget that you have the ability to block.
Yeah.
Because there's not a whole lot of feedback when you're blocking. You don't see much of an animation. And when you block an attack, like, you don't really see a whole lot going on when that happens. But in Dark Cloud 2, when you block, you can see your character visibly moving, like going into a very distinct blocking pose. When an enemy hits you...
Mortal Kombat blocking pose.
Yeah. And when an enemy hits you, you get, like, this, like, much, like, more elaborate feedback. It's like a little, like little disc of like blockiness. I don't know how you describe it. Like pops up. But yeah, it's a lot more evident that you're blocking, and it's a good thing. And the block button also enables you to throw things. Pick things up and throw them.
Yep.
So, in addition to that...
And it's kind of like pots in Zelda, where sometimes there's stuff inside little boxes and things you find in the dungeon.
And depending on the enemy, too, you can pick them up and throw them at others.
Yes, that too.
Doki Doki Panic.
Yes.
So in addition to that, you have the ability to backstep for the first time. Not just backstep, but backflip, essentially.
Oh, yeah. And you can do, like, dodge rolls, too, right?
I don't really think you can necessarily do dodge rolls so much as sidestepping.
No?
But it's like, both characters have a different, like a way of, like, backflipping. And they both have, of course, different charge attacks, and you're much less reluctant to use the charge attacks this time around because they're both effective, and you're not going to risk breaking a weapon forever. In addition to that, you can deflect projectiles back at the enemy or absorb their energy and then fire them back at the enemy with your sword, depending on which character you're playing as.
Oh, yeah. According to the manual, there's, backflip, but no, like, side dodge kind of a move. There is a pursuit attack. When an enemy is knocked down, if you press the X button while approaching them, you can launch a pursuit attack.
Yeah, so for Max, that's just like kicking the enemy when they're on the ground. Monica then just like outright like leaps a bit and stabs them.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and if you're moving towards an enemy and the enemy isn't down, you'll and press X, you'll actually like leap forward and attack them. So just these few additions really change the combat system into something that works really like a lot better. It feels a lot more satisfying, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Doesn't make things easier.
Even just having the way that you have like your right hand weapon and left hand weapon, like sword and gun. I think did Bloodborne steal that idea from Dark Cloud too?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean,
I forgot about the anger counter too. The enemies have that like anger.
Yeah.
Did they have that in the first one?
So the enemies in the back, and the enemies could become pumped up. Both games have this feature.
Oh yeah.
Where you have this like random effect that happens if you hit a certain like object on the map.
Oh yeah, the coin.
Yeah, it's the coin in Dark Cloud 2, and in Dark Cloud 1 it's just these little like fields that appear. In Dark Cloud 1,
I think there might be a coin in one, right? Doesn't it?
Nah. No, but it plays a sound like if it has a positive effect that's like boodaloop, and if it has a negative effect it's all like doodaloop. So you can pump the enemies with energy as like an effect from that, and also the enemies are already in that like pumped up state if you go into the back rooms in the first game. Now, so that's kind of like the equivalent of the whole thing that happens with the whatchamacallit, the anger counter. It's that effect.
Oh yeah.
We also haven't talked about the happy clown yet.
Oh yeah, the happy clown.
In both games, the happy clown pops out of a treasure chest sometimes, and
you have to choose your fate.
Yeah, he presents two gift boxes, and one of them contains potentially the greater of two gifts, depending on the situation. And I think it's always like, especially in Dark Cloud 1, it's like, you have the big gift box and the little gift box. And no matter what you do, it always seems that what you really wanted was in the other gift box. Like, you'll be like, oh, I'll pick the small gift box. It'll actually have what I want. And it's just like, nope, there's a sword in this big box. And you're like, okay, I'll pick the big box next time. Oh, here's a gemstone. This other box, you could have gotten that. But instead you get a piece of cheese.
The small box had a M1 Abrams tank in it.
Yeah. So they fixed that by making the boxes different colors in the second game, at the very least, to make it so you feel a little less cheated by the Happy Clown. And you can get some really nice stuff from him sometimes, too.
Yeah.
So, there's that.
And the Giorama system, they also changed that a bit.
Yeah.
There's more like individual, like if I recall correctly, it's a little different. It's not like Jim's house or Bob's house. It's kind of just like a house, and then you like put like kind of whatever you want on the house accessory wise, right?
Right, exactly. So you raise like culture points of houses. Some people have requests before they can move in.
Right. Yeah, it's not. That's the other thing. You can't just. You don't just have like characters that always lived there and you put them back in. It's like you have to recruit people to come live in the houses, and that's part of why Palm Brinks is so expensive, because it's like you walk around and you talk to people there, and you're like, hey, you want to come live in, you know, Sindar Village or whatever the heck.
Yeah, you could become.
And they're like, oh, I don't. If you bring me this rare fish, maybe I'll do it.
You can become one of the 7 dwarves or Jurak in the future, maybe.
Hey, you want to be Jurak? You want to be a frickin' tree with eyes and a nose?
It's interesting. The first game has Trent, who is the same as Jurak, essentially, but they're both surprisingly different characters. Because Trent, like, sneezes up objects for your character, like little like special objects, including a plot item. While Jurak, meanwhile, just kind of talks slowly and it's all like, I heard Emperor Griffin likes flowers.
Well, Lord of the Rings came out in between. Like the Two Towers came out, so.
And the book came out some, like, 50 years prior.
Yeah. But, I mean, like, the movie came out, and so they were like, oh, Treebeard, you talk slow. We'll make Jurak talk slow.
I can see that, yeah. Don't fret.
And then the Tolkien estate was like, oh, we're suing you. You can't have a slow-talking tree. That's our thing.
But his name is Jurak. Oh. Never mind then, carry on.
I'm just talking about Jurak. Then I can dig it.
Dark Cloud 2, fully voice acted. For the most part, I should say.
Yes.
For the cutscenes.
Yeah.
Which means that you can't name Max and Monica. You could rename Towan, and like I said before,
Everybody. You could name all the player characters.
but you don't get to rename Steve, anything like that. You can get a naming tag to rename your weapons through this mechanic that gets unlocked eventually, in which you get medals for certain accomplishments. Like, you have fishing in the dungeons. That's actually one of the, I think, more useful things to come out of the fishing system, is that you can get medals that way.
One of the more memorable musical themes in the game, too, I would say. It's the fishing and the dungeon theme.
Yeah, because the fishing theme is like it's just a slight variant, I think, on the...
Well, I guess it's just when you're in a dungeon that you've already cleared out, that music plays regardless of whether you're fishing, right? I just associate it with fishing in the dungeon.
Yes, but I also believe that like a slightly modified version of the theme with no percussion plays if you fish outside of a dungeon.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think that's probably also part of it.
Like at nighttime.
That makes sense.
Something like that. I just remember that being a thing. But yeah, the victory theme, not like the little jingle, but what comes afterward, once you've cleared out of the monsters, makes it more satisfying to do so than the first game. And also, like, it's a good theme.
Yeah.
It plays while you're fishing.
Yeah.
While you're playing.
And I'm not saying that it's one of the more memorable themes, because I think the music in Dark Cloud 2 is very good, but like a lot of it isn't really all that memorable, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of like
that's the case with both titles, I feel like.
Yeah. They're very good for like background music. They set the mood perfectly. It's just not something that you're gonna like be humming later.
While I was driving back to my apartment to record this, I did have a Dark Cloud 1's opening music in my head. Like the track mode music. I think partly because I was excited to record this episode. But yeah, you can also play golf to fix the space-time continuum. It's not golf though. It's Svita. Yeah,
but it's very similar to golf.
Yeah, you have to get the ball. So you have red and blue balls, and red and blue holes.
Yeah.
And your ball, I believe, has to be of the opposite color in order to land to the hole.
Right. Every time you hit it, it changes color.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful about, like, you want to hit it the minimum number of times possible.
Exactly. It'll disappear after too many strokes. So it's got that, like, element with golf where there's, like, a par,
Right, yeah. According to the manual, Sfida is Italian for challenge.
And it is a challenge. It's pretty difficult in certain sections, especially...
I really enjoyed playing Sfida when I was playing this game.
There are people that are just like... Dark Cloud 2 is one of the best golf games out there.
Yeah, I was like going back to like all the early dungeons and trying to get a good Sfida score.
Yeah,
because you don't get the access to the game until what, like partway through the third area.
The third chapter, yeah. So you get tickets, like little tickets that you can redeem for prizes from Mayor Need, from fishing challenges.
Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
For playing, you get skee ball.
Sfida also gets you items if you fix a time distortion. And also, I think there's one for par for beating the dungeons, but also one for like satisfying certain requirements.
Dungeon challenges.
Like using only items to clear out a floor, or using only Max's left-hand weapon.
Right. Or using only one character.
Yeah. So the thing about and those tickets you can use to rename a weapon if you want. And there's even a little glitch where if you rename a weapon to the name of another weapon, it'll become that weapon.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a really bizarre glitch I never tried, but apparently it's a big thing. And to people that makes the tickets worth it. But there's also like outfits that you can unlock that way. And because of the in-engine almost every cutscene in the game is in-engine, you'll see your character's outfits in every cutscene.
Yeah, that was another thing I was into, was trying to get all the outfits.
Yeah, you can get them from photography as well. Some characters will just sell them. Yeah,
you got to get those inside scoops.
Yeah, it's a very involved game. It's huge.
Which some of those you can actually, a lot of them you can miss your opportunity and not be able to get them again.
Yeah, like some for certain boss fights.
Some of them you have to photograph a boss, something like that.
Yeah, and there's even one of them is like one of them is cinders. You have to build. So you go to this area that like initially has like little bits of like cinders flying through the sky, little bits of like fire, like teensy little particles or something, and you destroy a machine to remedy this. But until then, you can only build certain structures. So if you build like a house out of wood or straw, it burns up. But you actually have to photograph a burning house of wood or straw in order to get one of the photo ideas for an invention. So that's also permanently missable after a certain point.
Oh, wow.
And there's other things that are permanently missable. That's more of a theme with the second game than the first game, because you travel into the future and, like, everywhere except Palm Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And you're basically rebuilding. You're basically building towns up in Giorama in order to create changes in the future so that specific people will be there and
Right.
be able to assist you on
In that way, it's influenced by Sonic CD.
It's true. You want to make a good future.
Yep.
But yeah, the future is also you're generally going to find the items that improve your health and your defense. And
Oh, right. Yeah, because in the first game, it was like as you built up the buildings, you like improved them, brought in more of the parts of them. There would be like little chests kind of littered around.
yeah, so every character has their
those
favorite
items.
food, and every character can eat a fruit of Eden. Like, the favorite food increases defense for them. And they can
Yeah.
eat fruits of Eden in particular to increase their health. And this carried over to Dark Cloud too, but it was a lot easier to deal with in the first game. And it also created permanently missable, like, increase HP, increase defense items too, because they're only in the future. And in the post game,
Oh, yeah.
you can't access the future anymore.
Oh, uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, I've only ever played through the post game once. Any other time I played the game, after a certain point in the extra chapter, I'm just like, ugh, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. This is like too much.
I never got that far. Someone deleted my save game.
Oops. Look, I saved over it by accident.
Yeah, and I forgave you.
I thought you were going to murder me.
But I was never able to get back into it enough to complete it. But it's okay. Every once in a while, I do revisit it and enjoy all the time that I spend with it.
Yeah.
But it's just so much to do.
Yeah, it's easy to get distracted.
Yeah.
Especially because, admittedly, the core aspect of the gameplay can get repetitive. And
Yeah.
combat is difficult in both games. You are generally a glass cannon after a certain point in the game. Like, no matter what, no matter how much you increase your HP, no matter how much you increase your defense, your characters can't take much punishment. And one of the things that should have carried over into Dark Cloud 2, but didn't, was the ability to kind of do the Dragon Quest thing, where if all of your characters get knocked out and you have to leave the dungeon, then your money is just halved. But you have legit game overs in Dark Cloud 2. So you have to...
Yeah. So the last time I tried to play Dark Cloud 2, I was resuming my save somewhere in the Butterfly Woods. And I played for a while, and I was like, you know what, let me really engage with the weapon build-up system. So I start like, yeah, okay. Oh, let me raise this, and I'll use this crystal, and this, and this. And then after a few dungeon floors, me being spoiled by modern games, I didn't save. And then I got a game over, and I was just like, oh my god, all that stuff I did, and I haven't played the game since then.
Yeah, that's the Dark Cloud 2 experience.
Yep. But that's my fault for thinking I'm playing like a game with autosave.
Yeah, and Dark Cloud 1 counters that by, again, having weapons that break forever. So, really, there's flaws with a lot of flaws get fixed from Dark Cloud 1 into Dark Cloud 2. But there's little things that you actually appreciated having in Dark Cloud 1 that get lost into the mix. Like, not only that feature, but also Dran's Feather was an item that you could use to just speed up your character walking through the dungeons.
Yeah, and once you get Dran's Feather, you're like, how did I ever live without Dran's Feather?
Right, especially if you're...
I ended up just, like, watching the mini-map, the little, like, arrow on the mini-map instead of my actual character. Just playing the game from a top-down 2D perspective almost.
And I emulated the game on a laptop that just was not meant for that sort of thing. And Dran's Feather was a lifesaver there. Oh my god.
Oh, yeah. Low frame rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, that's something that like you kind of lost in Dark Cloud 2. And you can get better, like quicker, like things to move around the the ride pod with. Initially it just has like, standard legs. You can give Steve.
Oh yeah. You get those
wheels, tank treads,
they're like roller blades.
Yeah, basically. You give him like a hover, like helicopter blades.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's cool that you can really customize your ride pod.
Yeah, you just have to watch out his health, which he's got a unified like health and battery meter.
Yeah.
And if he takes damage, then that also means that you're losing like time you can actually spend in that form. And Monica's monster transformations are the same, but again, she really gets the shaft.
Who cares? Yeah.
Because Max has access to all the side quest content. Monica gets different dialogue with some of the characters in like Palm Brinks and whatnot, which is cool. But she can't fish.
Does she play Svita?
In a cutscene. So
she like teaches you how to play it or something, right?
Exactly. So in the very first time when you play Svita, Monica shows you the ropes and you try it out, and if you can't get the ball in, then she's just like, I'll do it, and then she just like gets like a hole in one. So she can play Svita, but I guess
she chooses not to.
Yeah, she's just done it enough times in the future that she's just like, whatever.
Yeah.
So she can't do photography, things like that. So in some ways she does definitely get the shaft, but still.
Yeah, even though the game opens with her, she's not the main character. It's clearly Max. It's his story.
Yeah. But at the same time, she gets a lot of screen time, and it's...
She's just a glorified ride pod.
It's a game that benefits from having a smaller cast than the first game, I think, in regards to that. In just terms of playable characters.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of simplifies things, not switching between all these different characters that each has their own one weapon.
Yeah.
Kind of consolidates them down into two characters with like a sub character each.
Oh, I was going to bring this up earlier. In Shin Megami Tensei, you can your weapon options for attacking are sword and gun. So there you have it. That's a game that predates Dark Cloud, in which you can do either. But that's also a turn-based game, so
yeah,
sword in one hand, gun in another hand. But yeah, the characters get a lot of development as a result. Like, everybody, Toan included, in the first game is one-dimensional. And nobody really ever says or does much outside of cutscenes once you actually recruit them.
Yeah, the game in general is pretty light on plot, right?
Yeah. And, there's a handful of memorable characters like the Macho Brothers, for instance. But otherwise, the staff is very, like, it's very much what we expect in terms of, like, the plot and, like, depth of writing from Level 5 in their very first outing.
Yeah.
But once Dark Cloud 2 rolls...
It's serviceable.
Yeah, it's serviceable. It's a JRPG. When Dark Cloud 2 rolls around, though, you've got that very small, intimate cast of 2 playable characters. And you also... Everybody from Palm Brinks has their own unique design. Like, not every individual, but, every secondary character, we'll say, has their own unique design and their own, like, little personality quirks and whatnot. You see that more than you do in Dark Cloud 1. To an extent.
Yeah.
Also, one of the characters that's required to make a better future and have his descendants, like, help Max save the world from Emperor Griffin, is Max's dad. You actually place him in the fifth town, and in the future, like, the dude that, like, leads, like, the resistance group and whatnot looks like him. So Max's dad effectively starts a second family. And yeah, Max's mom, as it turns out, is from the future, and she's with the resistance. So he meets her, like, midway through the journey.
Right. So it was always meant to happen that way.
Yeah.
Which is, like, creates, like, a time paradox, really.
But it's also, like, at the same time, kind of like a self-resolve. Well, no. I don't know.
In that way, it's definitely influenced by the Terminator movie franchise.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like she traveled back in time to protect Max's dad because he had the stone and everything. So, she was keeping an eye on the stone, and then when they had a kid, after a certain point, like, the stone was no longer, like, Max's dad's property. Like, he just stopped wearing it or didn't take interest in whatnot, and so it rejected him. And I don't think it accepted Max at some point or something, so she just returned to the future when he was a kid as a result. Like, and then it turned out that Max inherited the stone. Like, it chose him. And Monica's got the blue Atmalelia stone, so you've got, like, this contrast going on through the whole game of, like, the red and blue Atmalelia stones. Like, the one that sends you into the future, I believe, is the red, and the blue sends you into the past. Yeah, because how else would Monica get back to the past? And that contrast is also found in Sfida, and also in certain, like just fights, for instance.
Fights?
Yeah.
Fights?
Yeah, some late game fights in particular have, like, a red and blue Atmalelia stone, like, kind of like indications as to, like, when a character is weak to it. When a boss is weak to a specific character's attacks, for example.
Right.
Yeah. So... overall...
Yeah. Dark Cloud 2 is my game of the year. What else came out that year?
Let's see here. Well, 2002 is Japan. 2003 is the US. I think the Wind Waker came out that year.
Let's go. Okay.
Let's see here. Wind Waker is 2002 in Japan, 2003 in the US. So very good.
Well, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. It's a good game, but it's no Dark Cloud 2.
Yeah, it's a pretty good year for gaming.
Uh, I haven't played Knights of the Old Republic. I heard it's good.
Yeah, I played a little bit of KOTOR.
Something called Call of Duty.
I don't. That's not going to catch on.
Oh, Manhunt came out that year? Okay, well, all right. Dark Cloud 2 is not as good as Manhunt.
No. The debut of Drakengard. Beautiful Joe.
Oh, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer game.
Ikaruga.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that Dark Cloud 2 is my game of the year 2003.
Oh yeah, absolutely, mine too. Big rigs over the road racing.
You're kidding.
Nope.
Did that come out 2003?
Yeah.
Oh my god. They could have done a crossover where you have I don't know, like a big rig ride pod body.
That travels through time when you go backwards.
Yeah. Well, should we wrap up our discussion of the Dark Cloud series?
Let's talk.
Are we going to talk about Level 5's other games?
Let's talk a little bit about the future of the series and.
Is there a future of the series?
That's one of the reasons why I brought up Sony Computer Entertainment earlier and their like partial ownership or access to the rights or something of the series. That's one of the things that will prevent there from being a Dark Cloud 3.
Okay.
The game has a couple of successors made by whatchamacallit, Level 5.
Are there
to an extent
games that have similar mechanics?
So
by Level 5?
Rogue Galaxy internally has a couple of images that are labeled DC3.
Oh, okay.
So it's been theorized that it started development as Dark Cloud 3. And some of the concept art, the protagonist of that game, like really early concept art, looks kind of like Max.
Oh. I never got an opportunity to play that one.
Yeah, me neither. I would really like to play it someday.
Yeah.
And then came White Knight Chronicles, which, you know, has Chronicle in the name, so it kind of follows that theme of Cloud, Chronicle, and then another word changes in that, so rather two words. So Dark Cloud, Dark Chronicle, White Knight Chronicles. And that actually had some kind of diorama element, apparently.
But nobody played that one.
It was... I think the first one was, like, very mixed in terms of reviews. Like, it wasn't that great. And then the second one was, like, reviled. Yeah, it didn't really turn out that well. But yeah, Metacritic score is 64 for the first game. Second game, 60. And apparently there was a prequel. God, I don't even see a Metacritic score for this one.
You know what a game I think has like that Dark Cloud 2 vibe to it? It's the Professor Layton. Just the series in general.
Yeah, the very first game especially, the town that you're in has very much like Palm Brinks vibes.
Yeah, I mean that's the only one I can claim to have played.
Yeah,
from what I've seen.
Well, didn't you play a bit of?
Doesn't one of those
Ni no Kuni
turn into like a? No. I want to play that one day. It's just there's too many games, and then I go back and play Dark Cloud 2 instead of playing like my huge backlog of Steam games. I'm like, oh, let me play Dark Cloud 2 for a while.
Well, you never beat Dark Cloud 2 anyway.
That's true.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's there won't be a Dark Cloud 3 for the aforementioned reasons. It definitely has
At this point, it's too late.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like if they made a sequel to Beetlejuice this year, you know, that would be.
Yeah. But yeah, it has its spiritual successors in some ways, whether it's the atmosphere in Layton, Giorama being a thing in White Knight Chronicles, or leftovers of a Dark Cloud 3 being somewhere in Rogue Galaxy. Rogue Galaxy also has a character named Steve.
Yeah.
Who's a robot, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So
And I think from what I've seen of Ni no Kuni, it kind of has that, like, just a similar aspect of there being lots of side quests and stuff.
yeah.
I might be wrong about that, but that was the feeling I got. I didn't watch much of it because I wanted to play it someday. So
Yeah. So I think a lot of times when people discuss Dark Cloud nowadays, instead of seeing a Dark Cloud 3, they'd want to see like somebody pull a Stardew Valley with the series.
oh yeah,
Develop a successor that has like some similar ideas or like it's the same gameplay flow, but improves on the previous in numerous ways. Like say, for instance, instead of looking for pumpkin pies like in the future in all these obscure corners of places that you can't even like zoom out and zoom back into like you could in the first game, what if your character's just leveled up? What if you could level up armor? Things like that.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, like just an
You
armor
know,
system.
going with the Stardew Valley angle, you could do like a 2D pixel art game.
You could. It would translate.
Yeah,
Combat would have to be very intricate. I think. Well, you would have to do it kind of like a Seiken Densetsu style, a little bit. But then again, Terranigma. We're going back to the roots of Dark Cloud, but that's a quintet game that's kind of like seen as in the same trilogy per se of Soul Blazer, and that's a
Right.
game that kind of I feel like the combat kind of has some similar vibes to Dark Cloud 2 in a sense. Just because of the fact that you're like limited to like a specific type of weapon, but you can do all these different moves and whatnot, like depending on certain button combinations.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
So you could do something like Terranigma. That would work for combat. Or go more of like a little...
Terranigma is like a game where you have to really kind of commit to an attack, similar to
Yeah.
Secret of Mana, right?
Well, it's like you got like your main default jab, but you've also got like your rapid jab if you hit the button fast enough. You got like the diving attack if you run, jump, and then attack. You got your typical jumping attack, your running attacks, and they're all useful in different circumstances. And certain enemies will be weaker to some attacks than others.
All right. Well, I enjoyed your presentation. I think this Dark Cloud thing is a good idea.
Yeah, I would say so.
I'm gonna give it the green light. I might even play some Dark Cloud 2 when I get home. I don't know. We'll see.
We will see.
Mm.
But if one of us happens to be developing a successor to Dark Cloud in some fashion, just be careful, because you don't want an AI to come along and steal your ideas,
Oh, I see.
unless it's Peepo.
People. Should we call it? Should we end it right there? Should we?
Yeah.
Is that where we end it? Like mid peepo?
Yeah.
Should I stop recording now?
Yeah.